Ready to go.
We call this continuation of the August 22nd, 2019 meeting of the AMATS Policy Committee to order at 4:03. We'll do a roll call. Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Mr. Wellington.
Here.
Mr. Schutte.
Present.
Ms. Heil.
Here.
We have quorum. Craig, will you do a public announcement?
Yes. All meetings of AMATS are open to the public. If we have a business item, we'll have presentation by staff or a consultant. At that point, the committee will be given a chance to discuss the item. And after that, the public will be invited to comment. And then we will have the committee, back to the committee for discussion and voting.
Thank you. Continuing the agenda, we have before us item 5A, 2040 MTP comment response summary. Greg, are you going to catch us up on where we were?
I'm going to let the pros do that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, I'm Vivian Underwood with AMATS, and at the work session immediately prior to this meeting, we reviewed how we got to where we are today after the policy committee meeting on August 22nd, when this body made some decisions about the material we presented regarding the draft AMATS project list for roadway, largely focusing on roadway, but also for transit and non-motorized, that will be included in the public review draft of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So the slide that's on the screen is the bottom line of where we are today, showing sources of revenue and costs, and where we're over-programmed and under-programmed, both in the short term and long term. And you spent your work session discussing things and going over what you did before and what your options are for how you might want to balance this. And we gave you some recommendations, and you're going to look at those and look at the technical advisory committee recommendations now, and hopefully come to the point where you can make some motions and give us some direction on how to move forward. We do want to have a public review draft this year. It's looking more like this year. So we can't let this, we would appreciate it if you could take action as soon as possible. So, thank you. I imagine the best, well, first of all, I guess you need to decide amongst yourselves how you would like to proceed. If you want to continue with the 4-page summary of action items, where you left off with the top of page 3, you recall, and you might want to just go through that and make those decisions, and then Aaron can show you how this works out, and then you can go on from there if you want to make other changes, but that's up to you all.
Thank you. So as we discussed a little bit earlier, I think, yes, I think we should start at the top of page 3, discuss amongst the policy committee all the remaining projects, and decide on any changes.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yes.
Just for clarification, the way we did it last time, we want to get a little closer to this, is we'll have an item. You guys get a chance to discuss it, then we go to the public to comment.
No, what he's telling you is not that.
Yes.
Go ahead and listen.
What I would like to do is have the group here discuss all of the remaining items, and
Okay.
then open it up.
It's an option.
Thank you.
Thank you.
However you want to do it.
Thank you.
Because we have 10.
We do. And, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So I like this idea that you got because, and please, if I'm wrong, somebody shout loudly, but it seems like the majority of the remaining items aren't going to eat up a lot of time because they're particularly challenging. I could be wrong, but they look like they're less challenging than the first items we dealt with. We went with the hard stuff first, if I'm not mistaken. And these are relatively low-hanging fruit, like correcting some of the amounts on the UMed TDM and updating the name of a map. So they seem pretty straightforward. One exception.
And then you may wish to return to the first item on page 1.
Correct.
Correct. Yeah, no, that's separate. That's
Oh,
entirely separate.
All right, yeah, thank you.
Okay. So, the will of the committee, discuss any concerns, questions you have with the remaining projects numbered 71 through 81.
They're all, the numbers are all over the map, basically pages 3 and 4.
Pages 3 and 4, correct.
Do they have the handout, this, the
Over there.
TAC comment? This is an 8.5 by 11 sheet?
11 by 17.
Oh, you made it bigger, okay. 11 by 17 sheet says like number of, on comment response sheet, comment, staff response, staff recommended change, and then the TAC recommended change. This is the items, these are the items we're going through. So do you staff presentation then on all of this? Or do you just want to move right ahead?
Yeah. Just discussing starting with the first one. Any questions or comments on the first one? Second chair.
I don't have that one, this sheet.
Oh,
It's all good, it's all
I'm
good.
sorry.
We thought we did, no, I thought I did.
All right,
Good to go with 71.
Yeah, I don't see anything.
very good. Any questions or comments on the second one, number 80?
An illustrative project, I mean, I like the staff recommendation of adding goal 5 to promote environmental sustainability. What's that? Yeah.
All right,
That's fine.
questions or comments on the third one, 107?
Just a recognition to Barbara. This is something we talked about before. It's not $750,000, it's $500,000 for the TDM. We think that's more than enough, and it's all we can afford, frankly, at this point. So
Really hear you.
it's all we can afford at this point. So we, the municipality, we're okay with doing a $500,000 TDM study, and I don't see any problem with it. I don't know, Pete.
I'm good.
All right,
What, do we have, at the end, we come?
Yeah, we're doing, so if it was hard to follow, I apologize. What we're doing is we're going through pages 3 and 4 in bulk, and then we go back to the regular public comment period.
That's what I thought, but verify.
Thank you.
okay. Comment number 108. Questions or comments?
For me.
I'm good. Just for the art expert, John, what do you think?
Which one we on?
108. Updating the name.
Oh, that's
Okay. Number 109.
So I just have a question, what's the staff recommendation if it's been crossed out?
Through the chair, it was because we're not going to move it to the short term after all. That was our recommendation, our second recommendation, the TAC agreed with.
So,
9 is in the short term.
This is about, this is about 303.
Oh, sorry, wrong. Field.
Oh.
It's on page 9, it was originally in
Thank
the
you.
illustrative.
Into the short term. And I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yes.
You are saying move it into the short term?
We originally were going to do that, but then after speaking with the director of the traffic department,
Right.
we learned they have plenty of money for
Yeah,
these
yeah.
projects.
Yeah,
so
for that
we just-
project.
yeah.
Okay.
So we decided not to do that. So our recommendation is not.
Leave it, just don't do anything.
Leave it.
Fair enough.
Staff recommendation is leave it in the illustrative.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Cool.
Yeah,
that could that be made more clear in the final
Yes.
response?
We're still like a couple $1 million left aside from that.
Because right now, I can understand that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on. Comment number 110.
This is, we talked a little bit about this a second ago in the work session, but this is one of those projects that probably could happen in the short term. I think it's important. It ties into your bridge, which you care so much about. So I don't see any problem with that one.
Well, this is, they recommended moving a couple, 321
Staff recommended moving it to long term.
Well, I thought we had 321 and 322 became combined.
No.
No, they just recommended moving both of them to the long term.
Out of the illustrative into the long
Moving to
term.
long term, okay.
So, but here we have it
Here,
different.
it moved to the short term.
Oh, short term. How do you reconcile that, Aaron?
So this is before, the changes that you see here are before the policy committee took action and kind of shifted some things around.
Oh.
So based on the policy committee's actions at the last meeting, our recommendation now would be moving it into the long term instead of the short term.
Gotcha.
If some of the other changes are done, like
Right,
moving
yeah,
spin
We're
off.
going to deal with that separately. So, Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
I think for this one then, for comment 110, I think what we would say is strike altogether. Strike this item altogether,
And deal with it.
and we'll deal with it when we get to
Agreed.
fiscal constraint discussion.
Oh, as a response to comments, will you make a policy committee recommended change column at that point? Or how would we convey this to the public tender, that they will understand what has happened here?
So I think, because we grouped them all together, when we get to the end, I think what maybe a motion would be is to accept all of the TAC recommended changes except for 109 and 110. Comment number 109 and comment number 110.
No, 109 tax increase was staff recommendation, right?
No, that one came out.
Staff recommended change was no change.
Right, 109 was the
Crossed out.
together.
Just comes out altogether. Would that convey the correct information?
This is what's been posted, so if we take something completely off, people don't understand why we've taken it off without saying why we took it off, or something will be confusing. We just have to be careful of how we do it. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong we've done, but it's just, it could be that when we get to the point to do a recommendation, we just say that 110 is, has been moved out to the long term. The policy committee has disagreed with both the TAC and the staff recommendation based on other decisions, so it's been moved. And that 1.9 was, is not gonna be changed. Isn't that one originally staying?
That's why we're
The
saying,
policy committee is that the project remains as is in long term. So, or illustrative, wherever it is.
okay. I mean, I could go either way. I think just saying we're approving the recommended changes, but not comment 109 and not comment 110, if that's where we land.
And I think that's fine, but they have to figure out how they're going to portray that in a finalized document. Just,
What do you guys think?
I'd recommend just making a motion separately for it and say move it into the long term instead of the short term.
Like to do the consent agenda. Vote to approve all but 109, 110, approve them all, and then 109, do it separately, 110 separately.
Then that keeps it clear for the people to follow along what happened with it.
Okay. You can do that.
I just want you guys to be, I just want us to be clear.
Yeah,
So
we'll break those
ultimate-
ones out.
Ultimate,
So you're recommending a single motion for the
well,
entire?
once we finish through this, we get public comment, then we'll craft a nice
when we get there.
No, we're there, not there yet.
Moving on then to the comment new. With Project 110 Glen Highway Frontage Road Study.
I would just.
This is 110, this is the conversation we just had where there was, so we're a little bit conflicted here. The recommendation was to move that project out of the short term and into the long term, which is what we just discussed in our work session. However, Mr. Chairman, we also discussed and pushed back on staff and said, why not just keep it in the short term? It kind of has independent utility, and it's $500,000. We're not really balancing a lot of books that way. So I don't know if we decided if that was the right direction or not, but just for the public, we did discuss this one already. Frankly, I don't have heartburn over either one, long-term, short-term, but it seems like it's not a lot of money, and it's an important concept to be studied that is supportive of the longer-term projects DOT has planned for the Glen Highway. I don't think it's fine either way. So I'd be fine with accepting it as recommended or not. It's really up to the group.
Comments from the group?
Thoughts?
Yeah, I did.
Leave it as is.
Happy to do short-term, long-term, I'm good either way.
Okay.
And these are just going out for public comment. These are gonna be looked at again.
Also true.
You don't have to twist our brains super hard on this right now.
Okay.
I have been.
All right, moving on to comment 17.
Good argument.
Yep. Nothing.
Okay. And the final comment, number 81.
No change. Fine with that one.
Okay. Any comments from the public on the discussion over the last comments? State your name.
Barbara Carl, KARL, on number 107. My understanding is that before the TDM study is done, that there's going to be a request for information. I'm wondering where we are in that process. And if it turns out that after that information comes back, there is not sufficient funds to do the TDM properly, would there be a way of getting additional funds to make it happen? Question mark.
I know that's public comment, but that was a question. Can I try? Sure. Okay. So in response to your question about where the TDM and the request for information process is at, you guys will see an appropriation for that money. So the TORA between the municipality and the state has been executed, and we're seeing that those appropriations finally flow. We have been unable to work on that project absent a funding source. And now that that's being established, the work on the RFI will begin to move forward. So later this fall, you'll see all of those pieces begin to come together. To your larger question about, we go through an RFI and we find out that our project scope should include soup to nuts, and there's no way we can get soup to nuts with $500,000 or less. What are our options? We'll have to come back and look at adding funds to that project. My gut and the research across country tells me that's not likely. Aaron and staff did tremendous research in looking at other communities of much greater size even, and what they do with their TDM studies, and I feel pretty confident that $500,000 will get us there. But if we run short, we'll have to find additional funding to fill the gap.
Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, what is the will of the committee?
Move to approve the TAC recommended changes on pages 3 and 4, except items, comment response sheet number 109, number 110, and I think that was it.
How about the new,
And new.
for project 110?
Well, that new, we just didn't care either way.
I could go either way.
So 109 and 110.
Second?
All right. Are there any objections? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Great.
Now let's go to,
109.
109.
okay, let's do motion for 109. Yes, thank you. Before we move on. So, the will of the committee on comment number 109.
And actually before, so it says here, I want to make sure what we're doing. TAC agrees with staff recommendation, and the staff recommendation is to not move into short term?
Correct, that's correct.
Okay, so motion would be, regarding 109, would be to leave project 303 in illustrative.
You wouldn't even need to make a motion if I'm correct, right? We're not changing anything.
It's just not very clear about
But this
what.
would make it clear, right? In regards to this comment,
Yes.
TAC recommendation, we're saying.
The
leave it in
PC saying leave it, making a firm decision that the project should be left in the long term, or illustrative.
So I guess, John, similar to the way you handled UMed, would it have to be a motion offered in the positive that we vote down?
You could go, I move that we leave it in illustrative.
Okay.
That's a positive.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so I move that we leave, in regards to comment number 109, I move that we leave project 303 in illustrative.
Second.
I think we just did it on all of it.
Oh, okay, so that counts. Great.
Have a second.
He did.
Mr. Peter.
Oh, sorry. Are there any objections? All right, hearing none, the motion is approved. All right, the final, what is the will of the committee on comment 110?
Move to project 321 Judah Road Access Management into the short term.
Second.
Are there any objections?
And actually, just make it, and this is based on our conversation in the work session, there were 2 projects, okay.
Correct.
We're just ahead of it now, okay, good.
Hearing none, the motion is approved. Now, we can go back to comment number 11 and 6.
Before we go, Aaron, are you doing math on the fly?
I'm going to. I just want to clarify, you guys said 321 is short term?
Correct.
But that was long term. We want that long term though, is that right?
321, they just moved into the short term.
Move to short.
Okay, we
In our
want it.
discussion earlier was to go long term though.
One of the things we discussed, yeah, was putting in long term versus short term.
Oh, well,
Oh,
we did the wrong thing then.
Yeah.
I was right about that.
Okay, move to reconsider that one. Recommend a yes.
I've been sitting here going, but that's the same thing it says. Why
It can
do
be,
you-
the motion can be reconsidered.
I just moved to reconsider. Second.
Second.
right.
Because it wasn't illustrative and we're moving it to long-term, is that correct?
And it wasn't short term, or,
So they recommended short term, but in the work session, that was recommended for long term. I think that's where we want to land.
right.
So any objection for
Oh, we have
reconsideration?
to make it.
He did, and he seconded.
Oh.
So we're good.
No objections to that reconsideration. Now we need a new motion.
What is the will of the committee on a revised
Move
motion?
110, comment, move
Project 321,
321 to the illustrative.
from illustrative
Oh, from illustrative
to long term.
to long term.
Second.
Are there any objections?
Before we do, for the members of the public that are not following along, this is on page 11 of the document. It's Project 321. During the previous work session, we did an exercise where we looked at how some projects that are in the illustrative categories and others have to be rebalanced so that our math adds up. This was one that staff recommended putting in the long term to help us essentially balance the books. So it's one that was discussed at length a little bit ago. Thank you.
Now, are there any objections? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Thanks, good job.
So now let's turn our attention to comment 11 and 65. The very first one.
Oh, the infamous 2016, 2017,
Yes.
216, 217.
Okay.
I
So
believe where we landed with that.
we'll start this over with questions or comments from the committee.
Just to replay, catch up where we are, I think.
Yeah.
And Aaron, tell me when I'm wrong. For the public, this is on page 8 of the roadway project list. 216, which is above it at our last meeting, was expanded. The project description or the project scope was expanded by the policy committee. We added a sentence at the end of that project description to include the interchange at Airport Heights Drive and Glen Highway intersection to the project scope. Originally, as presented to us, 216 did not include the intersection, 217 was the intersection. Because we've now folded the intersection into Project 216, we essentially don't need Project 217. It and its funding are both extraneous, and that's what we're discussing right now. Does that help?
Unless we repurposed 217, right?
Just get rid of it.
Well, that's the discussion. We've already folded from the, correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, but from the previous policy committee, we've already folded 217 into 216 based on the comments that we had before.
Just the constructed interchange at Airport Heights, yes. And so the TAC recommendation is to take 217, shift it to the short term, and change the name and description.
Name description. Discussion from the committee.
So I
Still doesn't
what
make
did we
any
do with
sense.
the money? So did we take that 15 million and put it up here?
No,
For
I asked
discussion.
that. I asked that last time, and he said no. Correct.
For, what was that?
The money, the dollar figure on 216 has not changed. Just the project description.
Why would it not change?
Because there's no funding. It wasn't a decision made by this committee to change to 216. Instead, the MCR project 213 had some money added to it, and Spinard Road was added in. So if 217 is gone, that money is already captured by changes made at the policy committee at the last meeting.
And they went to DOT projects, or, okay.
It'll help. Look at that number right there.
I'm not sure where they went. Where did the money go, Aaron?
A portion went to AMATS project with Spinard Road rehabilitation from Minnesota to Northwood, and the other portion went to the Midtown Congestion Relief Project. I believe it's project
213 is the couplet study.
116.
sorry, hold on. It's the other Midtown Congestion, it's 212,
Bottom of page 7.
bottom of page 7. That received a $30 million increase. And then the Spinard Road project was 20 million, so that was $50 million, which is the price of the 217 project.
So in essence, did it sound in line that the end result of all discussion is that we agree with the TAC recommendation?
No. What happened is 216 assumed the project description of 217 and the money was reallocated to other projects. But 217 is still on the books and needs to be dealt with.
But 216 is this long-term.
Right, 216 we updated, we took care of that last meeting.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we did all that at the last policy committee meeting.
And 216
But we got, 217, we got kind of high-centered on it because it was comment 1, it was the first one we dealt with. And we were still trying to wrap our heads around how all of the consolidation and renaming and stuff was supposed to happen. And that, since we got high-centered on this one, that's why we pushed it out to the work session. Not
Okay.
because it was necessarily particularly,
So it sounds like Are we gonna allow the repurposing of the number 217?
To be recycled as a project?
Yeah,
Oh, I don't know.
that's
Are we?
the question.
No.
You.
I think we just get rid of it.
Okay.
I think that seems less confusing.
Clarifying question. So I guess it's, we know what we need to do. so.
Okay.
All right. I have a question on it for discussion. Are we saying then that, Aaron, you moved it, the other 30 or 20, the other 20, you moved to project 320?
Correct. That was moved from illustrative to long-term at the last policy committee meeting.
And that's where I think we got hung up on discussion about monies.
Right, so the only thing it has to do is just delete 217.
Why would you delete it, not move it to illustrative? I mean, it's on
Because
your
it's a project,
right?
You don't need it anymore.
No,
Oh, it's
no
done.
project.
Scope.
Yeah, the version is 216.
Oh, that's right, it's pulled in.
And you already did it, so.
So we can make progress right now if someone moves to delete 217.
After he
After
provides public
Right.
comment.
So,
But yes.
Uh-huh.
okay. Any comments from the public on project 217
And 216, since we're
and 260? So the discussion up here was to combine the scope of project 217 and merge it with 216, and then the potential deletion of 217, and moving some of the monies around to two other projects. One being.
That's already been
But they already
done. That's
did.
already been
That's already
done.
been
All
done.
that's already been done.
That's the discussion. So are there any comments on
217.
projects 216 and 217?
Was the time frame of 216 changed?
Say it again.
Was the time frame for 216 changed? to
Can we
short-term?
get your name for the record? Just
Sorry, Joanne Mitchell? Thank you.
No.
No, it's long-term. It's
Short-term?
Yeah.
Oh,
Any other comments from the community?
Just to clarify, 216 is long-term.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, what is the will of the committee?
Move to delete project 217 altogether.
Second.
Are there any objections? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
And then moving the languages that are previous.
Yeah. But it should be reflected in here. You should see it.
What's in here?
Are you looking at the 9-3 draft? Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
So.
Yes.
Now he's gonna balance, right?
Yeah, now we have to rebalance.
And I have to go.
Now? Just when I got interested.
Part-timer.
No, it's just how it is. I helped with the hard stuff. I didn't think it's hard.
I don't have an agenda in front of me. Aaron or Craig or somebody, where are we at?
This is the only item we have on our agenda.
So the rebalancing is considered part of this discussion?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Chair,
thank you.
yes. And Aaron is trying right now to get to the bottom line of all the changes till now.
Great. And do we do those via discussion, public comment, and motion?
I think so.
Okay.
Bill,
So,
guys.
yes.
Sorry.
So for the first item of discussion, I'd like to look at page 8, project 214, Minnesota Drive, Smart Road intersection. As a project that's currently in long-term, where we are $63.4 million over our fiscal constraint, and you carry a lot of that weight, Mr. Van Hoek. This might be one that's ripe for moving to illustrative. Project 214. So that'll help reduce that 63.4. I mean, it keeps AMATS way under, but it helps reduce that 63.4 deficit that we've got. I think that's worth discussion and public comment.
Good on
It's just where we start.
That's just where I'm starting. Yeah, I've got, I don't know, 5 or 6 starred.
Okay, you're sorry.
214.
We're moving to illustrative.
My discussion, since I can't make a motion yet, my discussion is that that should be considered illustrative, not long-term, to help us reduce our $63.4 million overage on long-term projects.
This is the potential one-way on 36.
No,
Business, or is this
this is reconfiguring Spinard and Minnesota
or just the thing?
adds a turn lane.
So this one wasn't included in the staff recommendation? Yes, Aaron?
So just for clarification, Project 214 is actually AMATS funded. So moving that to illustrative will make it to where there's more AMATS funding available. It'll reduce the overall, just for
That's all I'm
clarification.
focused on.
Okay.
Big picture. Means you're still way over.
Right. Any additional discussion?
Let me make clear, so you're moving this to illustrative, so that opens up more funding.
I will propose that, yeah. That will increase the AMATS underage and will decrease the total overage by $9 million.
And I'm guessing you have projects to square that up.
We'll get there. This is just the first time.
And this is public comment, or you made a motion?
Yeah, no, there's no motion yet. I'm just
Discussion.
discussion. Yeah. I think we want to hear from the public on this one.
Sure. Any other comments from this
You know,
committee?
one thing just in general is, as we go through these, the rankings would have some relevance. You know, if you, I mean, each of these had some kind of ranking score at some point, right? We don't really have that here, so as we juggle different ones to make this balance, and I think I'm fine and I can do it, but just note for the future. I mean, if that's something that you should be able to do, right? Each project has some kind of rank score attached to it.
We originally gave the list to everybody with the scores on.
I'm sure we've
way
seen it.
back when, but, so, if it's in the long term, it's there because it did score.
Right.
It beat out tons of illustrative projects, so.
But, you know, it might be, 12 and another one's a 10, and say, okay, which of these two, if we're balancing dollar amounts, there would be some relevance. But I'd just make a note for future, it'd be a simple one more column, I think. But I'm okay with that motion.
That's a good comment.
Any comments from the public on MTP, now project number 214?
Yeah, hi, Jay Stange, Spinard Community Council. Our community has been on record throughout the Spinard Corridor Plan process and leading up to that we are strongly opposed to changes that would push volume onto Spinard Road from Minnesota Drive. And so I'm not familiar with the exact design that's proposed here, but I support the motion in the sense that if I'm correctly understanding, we don't want to reconfigure this intersection in any way that would add volume to Spinard Road, which we see in the future as a main street, complete streets type design similar to the project that was completed last year.
Any other comments from the community? Okay. What is the will of the committee?
Move to change Project 214's timeframe from long-term to illustrative.
Second.
Are there any objections? Seeing none, motion is approved.
What would that do to our? Oh, it's
9 million. So we're at 200 million.
No. That puts us at 54.4 roughly.
AMATS, you just moved long-term, you moved out of long-term.
Yeah, that put us at 54.4 without only one, but just a second, let me configure how much we are in the long term.
So you're 82.
Well, no.
Oh, no,
looking
I'm
at-
sorry, you're other.
Going the other way, yeah.
Because there were other changes made.
I'm looking at the total number.
Right.
So the overage we are right now in the long term is 16.3 million over.
What?
There were other changes as well.
You made a $50 million removal of a project, so that
Oh.
would move about 50 million and
Duh.
another
Thank
9.
you, thank you.
So it's rough estimates here, so we can,
I thought we moved that 50 million to other places last. So the numbers you've been showing us include the swapping that 50 million. But we didn't pull that 50 million out at that
Correct.
point.
It was still on the books.
So these changes you see here were only with the changes you guys made at the last policy committee meeting.
Well, making money.
So it's, you know,
So this is not reflective of what?
no, it's not.
Okay.
I can remove it if it's bothersome.
As long as you keep the track.
Thank you.
Next project.
Sure. If somebody else wants to go, I need to find my place.
I don't have anything, or you want to just go through?
Sure, I'll keep going. Project 306, located on page 9. Again, those of you that have been in the room for any length of time heard us talk about this a little bit. This is Golden View Drive rehabilitation. I believe this was a staff recommendation to help us balance our long-term books a little bit and move it out of, well, what happened? Okay.
It's just me.
Anyway, the discussion was to take this Golden View Drive rehab project, which runs from Rabbit Creek to Romania, and move it out of the illustrative project category and put it in the long-term project category, which I think is a great idea, and that's what I hope to do. Thank you.
Other comments from the community?
John?
I know, it sounds good to me.
All right. Any comments from the public on,
LT.
any comments on the public on Project 306, moving from illustrative to long-term? It's Golden View Drive rehabilitation. Aaron?
There's not enough funding to move that project in unless something else is going to be moved out, just to give you a heads up.
Thought we had 50 million plus 9 million.
We only have a delta of
Almost-
4 or 5 million.
Yeah, only about 4 or 5 million in the long term.
But that's where moving other stuff around will matter, John.
We freed up another 9 million and we had 50 million because we killed that one project.
But we're still 63.4 over, so
Oh, I was
that's
just looking
50.
at, I was looking at MOA stuff.
Oh, yeah, no, we're at $59 million. We're closing the gap, but we're still over. And what Aaron's saying is if we move this out of illustrative and into long-term, then we blew our budget. But that's assuming that we're not going to move other pieces.
Right, and so where are we at now, Aaron?
Only about 4 or 5 million left until we're,
Prior to this.
before this change, only about 4 or 5 million left in the long term over.
All right, what is the will of the committee?
Oh, wait. Are we done?
No
Great.
comments.
Move to modify MTP Project 306, taking the time frame from illustrative to long-term.
Second.
All right, any objections?
I'm going along, but I want to see where you're headed.
Sure.
Seeing none, the motion is approved.
We can move to reconsider anything within 24 hours.
Fair enough, fair enough. Okay, so that puts us roughly $5 million over, according to Aaron's math there. So on page 8, I think the way to solve that problem is to Project 215, which is currently in long-term for Minnesota and Tudor intersections. Again, doing some right turn lanes to help speed cars through that intersection. It's a $5.5 million project currently in long-term issue. I think that I would probably suggest we move that to illustrative, which will help balance our books. Keeps it in the MTP, which is good, but balances our long-term books.
The only comment I have on that, I think, as we discussed earlier, probably the majority of all these DOT projects that are in long-term would be moved to illustrative to balance.
So you like that idea?
Sure.
So it makes sense.
Yes.
Cool.
All right, are any comments from the public on MTP number 215, Minnesota Drive, Tudor Road intersection improvements? Moving from long-term to illustrative.
Jay Stange, Spadina Community Council, I strongly support this motion. I think that that intersection is already adequately built in my assessment and from my community. we support this motion. Thank you.
Any other comments from the community? All right, what is the will of the committee?
I move to modify MTP Project 215, changing the time frame from long-term to illustrative.
Sorry.
Any objections?
So that squares us up about on our goal.
Seeing none, the
Yes.
motion is approved.
Tell us, Aaron. Break it down.
No, the 5 million difference you had was before you moved the Golden View Drive into long-term. So adding the $37 million to it, you're 40 million plus. Well, a little less now because of the change you just made.
We need to go more.
The real helpful thing in terms of this, just from my point of view, is fixing short-term first, then long-term. Because what we have is we have a lot of carryover from short-term into long-term. That's kind of throwing the numbers off. We have about 40 million in short-term that's carrying over. So if we fix that, then we can figure out where we're at.
You want us back up and go to the 100? Is that what you're saying? We need to look at 100s?
Yeah, basically we have 40.8 million in the short term we need to utilize. And it's making it difficult to figure out where we're at with that.
So you want us bump long-term to
Into
short-term?
short-term.
Or illustrative in the short term, whatever you guys decide.
Gotcha. Sorry, I'm going out of order,
No, that's,
going backwards. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, when we had this discussion during the work session, I think, if I recall, another of staff's great recommendations was, to accomplish this, was related to project number 323, Turnigan Street Rehabilitation, is that correct? Aaron, was it 323?
yes.
And moving that out of illustrative. Moving that into short term doesn't seem to help us because it's an MOA project though.
I had a note here to move it to long-term.
Oh, long term, I wrote short term,
MOA balance.
long term, sorry, never mind, that doesn't help us, does it? Should we just take that one up since we're talking about it?
Turnigan Street, project number 323. Comments of the committee?
As I mentioned, this was one we discussed earlier, and it's currently listed as an illustrative project. It's in the Turnigan CIP. Bumping it up from illustrative to long-term hurts our bottom line, but we can hopefully get there and resolve that by taking on the short-term projects. Since I'm working from the backwards back up, I think this is one we should consider moving. Thank you.
Any other comments from the committee? All right.
Any other questions? Sorry. Turnigan Street collector, what is it now? Is it a collector, but it's not built to collector standards?
I believe that's the case.
Yeah, if I remember correctly.
Is that a neighborhood street effectively, Jay?
Turnigan.
So you bust that thing and make it a collector.
Yeah, so
Between Northern Lights and
through the
Tuesday.
chair, John, it's been a high priority for our neighbor community council at Turnigan because that's the roadway from Northern Lights Boulevard over to 35th that goes past the Rusty Goat. And there's been identified a high need in the community for sidewalks. And I think that in order to facilitate sidewalk construction, I think the status of the road or the design level of the road needs to be changed to one of the two collector modes. That's what I remember. But the community supports, I know Turnigan supports this project. It's been high on their CIP list for a number of years.
Okay.
Oh,
Aaron, I turned off my iPad on accident.
That's the news.
I don't know this secret code. Wait, no. Thank you. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay.
all right, comments from the public on comment number 323, Turnigan Street Rehabilitation, Northern Lights Boulevard to 35th Avenue.
Cheryl Richardson.
Yes.
And myself.
I just think it's worth mentioning at this point that over the years, when neighborhoods have been faced with collector standards, oftentimes they are found to be too high speed for the neighborhood. And I know there's been a discussion internally between the municipality and also the state about how to manage the standards and get sidewalks without increasing speeds next to homes. So I just want to flag that I think people are aware of this problem. I'm not sure it's been resolved. I have not been following this issue.
Any other comments from the public? The will of the committee.
Let me catch up real quick, sorry.
That's right,
Lost
page
my
11.
Page 11, thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, I move to modify MTP project 323, shifting the timeframe from illustrative to long-term.
Second.
Thank you. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion is approved.
We're still in a big.
I know, we need to get back to the 100s.
So we'd like to look at short-term to, or long-term to short-term, or it's a little different. And did you have recommendations, Aaron?
I'm going through.
There's one.
One recommendation was 320, moving it from long-term to short-term. That's the Spinard Road rehabilitation. It is on page,
That's right.
On the page.
Weird page.
Bottom of page
Page
8. Second from the bottom, page 8.
Questions or comments from the committee?
So page 8, number 320, what we're talking about is taking that out of long-term and putting it into short-term, is that correct? Cool, sounds like a good idea.
And where's that put us, Aaron?
He's gonna have, meeting
He's got to have
was,
like a running tally of.
was 40 over, so that takes care of 20s.
it's, yeah, a little bit different. It's a lot over. In the long term, not as much in the short term. Hold on a second, let me try and find it.
Yes. That's where you started.
In the short term, just a second, sorry.
While we're looking, we have 5 minutes left of our time, so we would probably want to extend.
Sure. I make a motion to extend until 5:30.
Second.
Thank you. Hopefully that's okay.
Any objections?
No, I don't think this room's booked, is it?
No.
Okay, I was going to go check.
Motion is approved.
We're good.
To extend until 5:30.
Okay.
What'd you have in the short term, Aaron?
So it's about 22 million under in the short term still,
So this is.
if that change is approved,
So after.
after the change is approved.
Any additional comments from the committee?
Say the math one more time.
Sorry.
22 million.
22 million under still,
22.
after this approval. If it's approved.
And long-term?
Sorry, just a second. And long-term, about 45 million over.
Okay, thank you.
Any comments from the committee? Additional comments from the committee? Any comments from the public concerning MTP number 320, Spadard Road Rehabilitation, Minnesota Drive to Northwood Avenue? Northwood Drive, moving from long-term to short-term.
Jay Stain, Spinard Community Council, strongly support the motion. We have identified these two sections of Spinard Road as key public investments in the Spinard Corridor Plan for moving ahead with our community. So want to thank the committee for considering this, and I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Any additional comments from the community? Thank you. Will of the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I move to modify MTP Project 320 to change the time frame from long-term to short-term.
Second.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion's approved.
Mr. Chair, the other project that we had talked about at the work session, moving from long-term to short-term, was project 201. It ends on page 6 and about the middle. It's the 3rd 6th Avenue couplet, 5th Avenue two-way conversion project.
Moving that to short-term. Is that right, Aaron?
Yes, from long-term to short-term.
I think that makes sense. We talked about that in the work session.
So that makes Third Avenue a one-way? Is that what this would do?
Yeah, it proposes changing the couplets from 5/6 to 3/6.
This is like midtown plan.
That goes.
No, this is downtown plan.
I mean, downtown's plan.
Yeah.
This goes,
Yeah.
this goes by Brother Francis, right?
Currently, but this starts at Gamble or Ingra, the scope of this one. I think actually it wasn't defined. Oh, no, it is.
South Street to Ingra.
Ingra,
Yeah.
Okay,
so up the hill.
up the hill, all right.
Any other comments from the committee?
This was one that I had a question for staff on. Aaron, I wrote something down which makes me think I didn't actually ask the question, so I'm going to ask it. And if I'm asking the same thing twice, you can make fun of me for it later. Long-term, short-term, I get. Is there any net benefit to shifting it? Well, I guess they're both under. I was going to say, is there any net benefit to shifting this within the funding responsibility categories from AMATS to DOT?
And our bottom line, no.
Bottom line, no. Okay. And the math, we're both under on AMATS and DOT individually, short-term, so it doesn't really benefit either one.
Yeah, I'd have to look. Yeah, we're both under a little bit with the muni still being over.
Yeah. Okay. Never mind. Thank you.
Any other comments from the committee? Seeing none. Are there any comments from the public on project MTP number 201, 3rd and 6th Avenue couplet, 5th Avenue two-way conversion, E Street conversion, L Street to Ingrid Gamble / 3rd to 4th Avenue? Seeing none. What is the will of the committee?
Chairman, I move to modify MTP project 201, changing the time frame from long-term to short-term. Do I have a second? Thank you.
All those opposed? Seeing none, the motion is approved.
Just a little bit. 35 million to go.
It's about 11.5 million under in the short term. And then I can calculate what the long term is. Just
35. 4.3.
And it's 34.1 million over in the long term still.
It won't help the unders, but I know we had some staff recommendations from moving long-term out to illustratives. Did we capture all of those?
You know, 300 was already done.
Which one?
128th Avenue. goes right by Ocean View, but we had that in the bond.
Is that what, oh, actually, that was a question I had, I asked Todd about. We should ask staff, John, didn't we?
120, I'm sorry, Project 300, it's 120th Ave reconstruction. We had on the bond this spring.
It's programmed in this.
I thought it started this summer, but maybe not. I mean,
That's why,
what do we do with it here?
well, that's why we're recommending leave it in the Lester too.
But it's being done. I mean, it'll be done in 2 years.
That's because it's funded.
The problem is we didn't account for the funding when we did our revenue snapshot. The funding got approved after we kind of did the calculation of how much the muni generally gets from bond funding. So because we're not showing the revenue, we shouldn't show the project cost. That's why it says it's outside the MTP for the cost.
But is that what that new column is?
Yeah, funding outside the MTP.
Is that the only project in there?
There's one other, there's the Glen Highway third lane from Artillery to Highland. That was state funded. It was identified outside the MTP funding.
Okay, so moving that to short-term doesn't make sense because it's already funded, we're rolling with it. You just want to have it, it's on the list.
It's one of those quirky things that when you take a snapshot in time and updates happen after it, it kind of, how do you catch it as you go?
So you're saying, being in that column outside MTP, that $53 million project doesn't show up in there?
It does not.
Where's this column outside MTP?
Up here, it says funding outside MTP fiscal years. Some of them have a cost estimate that's in that column and not in the 18 cost estimate column, like the project you highlighted.
So, Henry, you keep track, we get through all of the staff recommendations on moving the project into the short term?
Yeah, let me flip through all my pages real quick. It's an unwieldy document, I tell you.
Yes, that is all of the staff recommended changes in terms of moving stuff into the short term to help cover the funding.
So you're still 11.5 million under though.
Correct.
Yeah, we still have more over in there. And under's not as bad as over.
I think I've got one more. I don't know, now I'm confused.
Reminder that under is not as bad as over. We really need to concentrate on getting that long-term closer to 0, 34 over.
Oh, never mind, I just cleared up my confusion. 103 and 203 are the same project, one's in the short term, one's in the long term. It's kind of like the railroad folks, where they should get a slash.
Yep.
Yeah, it's the annual funding for the rideshare and transit marketing stuff. Similar to the discussion we had earlier about the railroad, how their programs are annual, ongoing. They have a ST/LT in their columns.
I see it.
These are just split up. Any reason why these are split up like this?
Calculate the funding. It helps us with knowing if we're over or under because we have to be able to show it in short term and long term since there's a small portion of it. So.
So if we're looking, so we have 11 million, so 315 is 7 million. And then, Aaron, you had recommended 313, move to long term. I mean, I could go to short term, and then we kind of got that 11 million close, pretty close.
Yeah, that's
You know,
fine.
Old Clout Road, which I go on occasionally, that is definitely not a collector road. That makes Huffman look good.
It's a local
You
street.
can find the pathway under the bushes that have overgrown it.
Oh, I know where that is. Oh, it's,
It's great. I mean, it's a beautiful place to live, but that road is definitely rural. Okay, so I'll help out. I move to, discussion. All right, folks. Project 315, Old Clat Road from Timberlane to Victor, $7 million, move from illustrative to short term.
Any other comments from the committee?
It's an MOA project.
Project 350.
Oh, it is.
Does that work?
It's an MOA project.
Oh, so we're looking for AMATs, MOAs in a pickle?
For the short term, we are.
I haven't really been paying attention to each individual breakdown because of how things have been going. It kind of, the bottom line is,
I want to make
It's
sure
all
it's
about the bottom
realistic.
line.
Yeah,
Because think about it, in the long term, they're still way over.
Yeah.
Right? So it kind of balances out. Some people are over, some people are under, but the total amount zeroes out.
You create expectations, so if someone sees, oh, that's a short-term project now, well, that's great, I want to see that done. I know there are people in that area who certainly want it done. Now, if we were to say, let's make that an AMATS project, then I have to make it $14 million.
You're catching on.
Yeah.
Can we make it
Well,
11, then
you can-
we're squared up?
You can do that.
if you desire, you can do that, of course.
Move it to AMATs.
We have room, but the 7 million is not realistic for AMATS.
No.
Can I make it 11, are we sort of realistic?
11.5.
If you
11.5?
want to make it the exact number to balance the program at 11.5, you can do
You know, I
that.
mean, I want to make it realistic too. I don't want to fool people. Okay, but I'll make this motion, let's see how,
Oh, discussion.
open for discussion, folks. 315, Old Clat Road. Move it from illustrative to short-term, move it to AMATs from MOA, and increase the cost estimate to 11.5 million. And 13 cents, but who counts?
Partridge in a pear tree.
Thank you, John. Any comments from the public on the discussion on MTP 315, Old Clat Road rehabilitation, moving from illustrative to short-term, and moving the funding from MOA to AMATs? Seeing none?
Oh,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I was not listening carefully enough. Cheryl Richardson. Are we sure we wouldn't rather look at long-term first? I'm trying to get through quickly, long-term into short-term rather than going all the way from illustrative.
Well, possibly, but
That puts us further out of whack.
that would move us further out of whack with.
Oh, okay, we're looking at whack.
And there's
Okay.
room in AMATs. And if it wasn't scored high, it was misscored.
Any other comments from the community? Sorry. Seeing none, what is the will of the committee?
I move that project 315 be moved from MOA to AMATs, moved from illustrative to short-term, and the budget, the cost estimate to 11.5 million.
Second.
Thank you. All those opposed? Seeing none, the motion is approved.
Those are short term.
So with that change, it puts us 0.2 over. I forgot to calculate how much the inflation would kind of mess with that.
0.2?
0.2 over.
You want to make that 11 million?
11,
But I think your motion originally when you discussed, or your idea before it was a motion, was just whatever the balance was,
Yeah.
right?
That was the intent. Do you want to make that 11? That work with
So
everyone?
11.3 or?
11.3 gets us to be 0.1 under.
Perfect.
Move to amend that number to 11.3 on number 315.
Second.
All those opposed? Motion is approved.
Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. Does this mean that the DOT PEL implementation project in the short term is no-go? Because there's no money for that now.
Okay.
If you're doing the bottom line, apparently, there's no money for, some of the DOT's money is being taken to you for some of these other projects, right?
Say that one more time?
Well, it was $36.5 million under DOT, and if you've just balanced the bottom line, the total bottom line, what did that do to DOT's $36.5 million? It's gone.
On the under? That's the discussion I was trying to have earlier when we were moving money from PEL to Spinar. That was all DOT money. And it kind of gets to the discussion we had at the beginning of this.
So are you okay with that?
DOT is not.
Well, I'm concerned about that.
I think we need to keep in mind, one, that this is something that we're going to put out for public comment. This is early on in this area, and as Mr. Shuey has pointed out, the bottom line is we have to balance. That's what the feds are concerned about. The other part is a different discussion that can happen at a different time, I think.
Well, we're really hoping to finalize this, and that was the point of doing this today, was to call it out and to make sure that people who are concerned about their money evaporating and by, being used by others, then we need to work that out here. I don't want to put that out for public review and comment. I really don't.
Well, I think that's gonna be a hard one to solve, given that, the MOA is 26.1 over, and we're not likely to reduce that in the short term, right? And so that means the 40.8 needs to be made up from other sources, which I think John did a little bit of. Now, not a lot of it came from, any of it came from DOT,
Right.
but.
I mean, that was the only one that I was concerned about.
Which one is that, Todd? Now, is this that 50 million that we
Yeah.
split up?
Yeah.
And did
30 of it went, 20, I can't remember, 20 or 30 of 30.
20 went to,
30 of it went down, and 20 of it went to Spinar.
and neither is a DOT.
No, the 30 is open, that's moved to the.
And the 320, the 320.
There's 20 million in
So
AMATS.
so the amount that DOT is under in the short term, 36.5 million, that was to have been the PEL implementation project, but you all didn't take action on that. You didn't add that project into the short term. So there's now no PEL implementation project in the short term for 36.5 million.
Which
Is
project?
that acceptable?
But let's separate the top, if I understand you correctly. You're saying there's no project and the allocation is light on DOT and heavy on AMATS and MOA. Is that the essence what you're saying?
Yes.
They're kind of two independent issues
Not
though, aren't they?
really.
Not really.
No, I really wish we had done it just by the source, just kept it within the source. Have AMATS do their stuff, MOA do their stuff, and DOT do their stuff. Because now we're all mixed up again. And DOT has lost their implementation project in the short term.
That was the policy committee's decision.
I'm not sure that was transparent, the way we were doing it, the way it was done.
You talking moving to 217
Moving
to
money around?
260?
If you recall, 217 went away.
Correct.
The idea was to have a new project in the short term for the PEL implementation for 36.5 million, to use up what you were under in the short term. But now all your DOT money is gone.
Well, because we balance the big number, not against,
That's right, but we have to have this conversation. You have to think about whose money are you moving? That was the big question last time, and I thought that's what you all were gonna do.
Well, let me just say again,
Okay.
that when we moved that money around on 216, I made the comment that you just moved 20 million of that into Spinar and was outvoted.
But when you moved 115 out, you freed up $70 million, right? So,
When we moved 115, was that done last time?
oh, this is, I'm just
15 doesn't
really
even show up.
I think the problem we have now is we're midstream,
Yeah.
trying to do a different way of doing this.
We should have done it within we should have done it with just municipal funding.
Well, yes and no. I mean, it's not a requirement that it balanced individually, right? It's your preference, and I can see how that's preferential, but, or preferred, but it's not a requirement, again, but it's the bottom line that matters in the eyes of the funders, right?
Well,
I mean, we're not doing
Who's
anything that's
bottom
gonna
line?
necessarily mess us up in the eyes of the feds.
if you're using DOT's money and you're saying it's gonna go for projects that they can't fund, that's not right. That's not
To
right.
answer his question, correct, in the eyes of the feds, but the expectations of the public are of more concern to me. If you move DOT money from a DOT project, put it on an AMATS project or a municipality project that we're not going to fund, the expectations from the public, whether it's short-term, long-term, or wherever it is, hey, where's this project? And it's never gonna get started.
I think this is the time for you all to have that conversation. I really do. You've got to sort this out now, at this very moment.
No, I'm gonna let the train wreck happen. Go
No,
ahead.
no, we cannot do that.
No, I'm not comfortable putting, if we just watch the bottom line and we put something out there that simply can't happen, that's not fair to the public process. I mean, we might get away with it, but and if we can't get it done today, we'll work tomorrow, I guess, but we should fix it some way.
We should probably, a starting point might be to look at each individual category of funding and get that sorted out. And then you can have the conversation, well, would DOT be okay with funding this project?
Oh, okay.
You know, but get it sorted out, because
Because you,
Hold that thought.
It's not like it's nothing.
right, you just have to commit to it. Right. No, that's the municipality, that's folks, and this board, exactly.
Okay. Do you want to finish and then we'll get to this?
I'm sorry, I just, would it be a good thing to do, maybe next time, is to go through each category and say, how do you want to balance out the Muni's funding and AMATS's funding and the DOT's funding, and then starting doing horse trading? To see, are you comfortable with taking away some of DOT's allocation for these projects? You know, at that point, then you would know what you're talking about. But they got cut off at the knees. This little.
I think, again, this was a conscious policy committee decision at the last meeting.
I understood that you were going to talk about.
No, on this one item in particular, on the 50 million that got reallocated to Spinard, and what was the other one?
The Pell.
The Pell.
Yes.
Spinard and the Pell.
Yes, sir, but for the short-term DOT that's 36.5 under, their money's gone now. They're allocated, that money's gone.
Well,
In the short term.
Can I add too, so, and also what we've done is we've moved that money to AMATS projects, but it's more than we will get, more than AMATS will get, right?
Yes.
Okay, we can't do that then.
No,
Yeah.
because we don't have the capability of sorting it out 9 different ways, you know? We can only tell you bottom line. We can't do it. So can you create?
I have it
Excel
broken down
spreadsheets?
to where it's by funding source,
You
by,
do?
yeah, by Muni, AMATS, or DOT.
Can we look at it?
We're like right now where we're at, bottom line with everything.
Yes.
Well, the Muni amount hasn't changed. It's still 26 million over. AMATS is now, like 10 million over. And the rest is coming out of DOT. So DOT is like 37 million, DOT hasn't changed any, so they're probably 36 million under, or 40 million under, or something like that. So, yeah, basically what Vivian's saying is DOT's funding, technically, is being used to pay for AMATS and Muni projects.
In the short term.
In the short term.
In the long term, the converse is true.
Yes, in the long term, Muni and AMATS funding is being used to pay for DOT projects. And I think that's why they've always done it as a pool of projects, because there's some recognition that there's always going to be some trade-offs of who's paying for what.
I think that's why, at the beginning of this meeting, during the work session, I wanted to point out that being as restricted as we are in our available funds, trying to identify a new project that we haven't ever even brought forward or are unlikely to bring forward in the short term. I mean, we have no funding available until 2026. And at 2026, again, then we're talking about the entire state competing for a few $1 million that's left. And if you're putting projects in the short term that you're allocating DOT funds to try and pay for, it's unlikely that those funds are going to be available in the short term.
So it's still about 34.1 million over in the long term.
Which one? Long term.
Long term.
So that's the bottom line, but
That's
our
the bottom line.
allocation between pots of money is way out of whack.
Yeah, it would be, AMATS and the Muni are under in the long term and DOT is over in the long term.
And you're saying there's no way to really reconcile that, because you're not gonna have the money.
Yeah, we're not, I mean, we're talking about, matter of fact, we're meeting this fall to have a STIP meeting, and all we're talking about is moving the next 2 years up, no new projects, yeah, the next 4 years. So that puts us out to 2022. And then that still has 2 years worth of scored projects on our books that we haven't even had to.
So what I'm hearing is that with the revenue assumptions that this model's based on are really correct. You don't have that kind of money coming in.
They're based on history.
A lot of it's a programming thing versus a revenue thing. The revenue is available, but the programming becomes, this is what they want. So that's kind of one of the things to think about is I don't see the revenue assumptions changing because the majority of the funding is federal and I don't see that decreasing over time. There's some state money, but we've already accounted for years and years of no money.
Right.
So a lot of it just comes down to how is DOT going to program their money as they go along.
I mean, you say program, what projects they'll spend it on, and not all of it comes to Anchorage. So realistically, the money you expect to come, your model expects to come to Anchorage may not be what DOT is prepared to spend here based on your current STIP. Well, so that's really the thing that's throwing us off here.
Well, it's based on historical from what was programmed or what was actually obligated, so what they received within our boundaries, within the AMATS boundaries. So it's based on actual historical data. If that changes with the next MTP or is changing now, we can capture that with the next MTP, but we're kind of locked in with our revenue assumptions right now. Because if we had to update our revenue assumptions every time a governor changed or somebody else came in, we'd never get anything done.
Right.
That's why we spend, 5 years updating the MTP and then we start the new one right away.
We should get on that 4-year cycle like the government is.
I wish.
So if we were to move, I mean, so you have more money to spend on this model. This model says you have more money to spend in the short term. But realistically, you're saying, we could add projects, but they're not gonna get done.
Correct.
So how do we get something realistic out to the public?
They're saying two things, or at least the two key points I'm taking away from staff and from DOT is, in the short term, they're gonna collect, they're gonna have fewer expenditures than the revenues that they collect by $36.5 million, which is Vivian's point of, we're now saying that they're going to pay for other projects. So that's part one, right? And then part two is this bigger discussion, which Todd was highlighting, which is they can't absorb that amount of money in the long term, or that amount of commitment, I guess I should say.
Well, even in the short term, though.
Absolutely.
I mean, now that we put, but now we've taken some of this bottom line here and filled it up with AMATS money that we won't be getting either. We've overextended ourselves because we went by the bottom line. Well, I like your revenue assumptions, but I don't think that's our challenge though. So, I mean, we basically done in 2 minutes unless we extend. Do we meet again? Can you break out, here's AMATS, kind of based on where we are now. Here's AMATS money, MOA money, and state money, and we'll look at that soon.
Yes, I can do that.
And what happens to are we okay on the schedule for getting this out? You'll have it done by February?
No, they've been telling us that for months.
Okay.
This is a train wreck, actually, but you know.
This is not a train.
It is a little bit, it's turning into one.
No, thank you.
So, to staff, I mean, okay, so the request that you were making of us, that I must have missed it, maybe it wasn't very clear to me, is only look at a term and a funding, or a, what do you call it? A funding responsibility. Only look at those. So for the 30.4 that AMATS is under in the short term, only focus on that. Figure out how to rejigger the short-term AMATS project so that becomes zero, or as close to zero as we can get. And do that for each group. Do that for DOT projects, do that for AMATS projects, do that for MOA projects, okay? But you understand the challenge in that is it takes away, you call it horse trading, I call it balancing of the priorities of the various groups that are in this room. In the way I read the MTP, DOT's got a lot of, I mean, you may not be able to pay for it, but you've got a lot of needs that are longer term needs. You know, you're talking about rebuilding the primary highway connection between the northern communities and the bowl. These are big deals. They should be big, right? They should be heavily slanted towards DOT priorities in those years. The MTP should. That's kind of how I look at it, and maybe
Well,
that's wrong, but
Through the chair, if we have to live with our, we basically have to live with our financial assumptions now. Going back and retooling those according to what we think is going to happen at DOT, I think that programming discussion is just is creating problems, you know. If we could stick to what we've been doing up until now, the way that we've been doing it for since 1979, I think. And it is a legitimate way to do it. We're supposed to do it based on trends, past trends, and we're following FHWA guidance to do it this way.
I guess I don't have any issues with the assumptions and the financial assumptions, but it's just, we need to stay in our lanes when we talk about spending money.
Right, and even if you can't spend all of your money, nobody else can either.
Right.
So you might as well go ahead and say what you would do if you got it.
Right.
If our assumptions hold true, and this is what you think you're gonna get, then this is what we would do with it. And we can't, you know, maybe you could spend it on other things, but maybe that's the discussion that.
Okay, I mean, the way our process works, statewide process, it's much more clumsy than this. You know, it's, as Eric well knows as well, that it's a long process to get projects in and out of the funding cycle. And especially when you start with a heavily constricted list of project already and over-programmed. You know, you're not talking about adding anything until the distant years. And so that is where the problem comes in. And we as a state are working on that now. We're tightening our belts, and we're eliminating projects, and we're downscoping projects, and we're doing all kinds of trimming that way to try and get our fiscal house in cleaner order. But it is an issue.
Mr. Chairman, we've gone over. I move to extend the meeting till 5:45.
Second.
Yeah, any opposed? Motion is approved. Extended.
Whoa.
I'm ready to go.
You got it.
He clocked out.
Motion is approved. We're extended to 5:45.
So, if I may,
Yes.
that's just a comment. I think, you know, I understand the math. I think that philosophically, and the idea of staying in your lane, I understand that. I think philosophically there is this balance, this give and take between short-term priorities and long-term priorities, and should it be more heavily weighted in one term, one time period towards a particular entity or series of projects. I think there should be some give and take there. If, however, the way it's always been done, and the request from staff and others is go through the time periods and balance the books individually so that everybody nets zero, that's going to take longer. You're going to have to figure out a way to accommodate us to do that, because it's certainly not how I came into this. I was focused on the bottom line, and that I have heard repeatedly, the bottom line is all that matters. And I blame Craig for this because he tells me everything. if that's not the case, then this committee needs, we can't do you guys any service sitting here and trying to hash this out. We have clearer instructions. If those are our instructions, then we have to kind of go back and do more. There's no way we're gonna get the MOA, AMATS, and DOT to net zero on each of these time periods today, in the next 10 minutes. I mean, this guy's got a $200 million problem we have to solve.
Mr. Chair, I apologize for any confusion. And the thing that stood out in my mind was, I believe it was Mr. Schutte asked for whose money are we moving around? And I thought that was what you were, one of your big concerns, so.
I'm interested in it. I didn't think I needed to actually make it balance. I was interested in it.
I'm sorry, well, I guess that's.
I'm okay with spending Todd's money.
I think a lot of this shows that this MTP kind of is making recommendations on how we handle ourselves next time, and it may be that we need to shift towards looking at each of the funders, MOA, AMATS, and DOT, and kind of balance the programs around that. But we've kind of already gone too far into it, and I honestly don't know if doing that is the best avenue, because instead of being a cooperative body, you end up becoming, well, this is what we want, we're not going to do anything else. Instead of working together, you're not really the spirit of cooperation when you individually say, this is finite, this is all we can do here, here, and here.
Well, I see it a little differently. I see it that would be you get that picture, and then you can have the conversation about, would you be willing to do this? What if we do this? And can we?
As a starting point, doing what Aaron described as a starting point, and then doing what we thought we were doing here, which is how do you live with changes within that?
Yes, I'm so sorry.
And that's,
I really am.
what you and I have been talking about is, it's a balancing act. It's never going to be perfectly net zero for each category. You have to have some give and take.
Of course, yes.
I felt like, maybe I won't speak for everyone up here, we felt like we were doing that through this process.
I'm sorry.
And that's why I keep saying, I get the fact that we're focused on the bottom line. Are we fiscally constrained within the short term and the long term? Doesn't matter how the sausage is made, is it fiscally constrained? I thought that was the direction we were supposed to go. If you're saying we need to be more fiscally constrained individually within those short-term, long-term categories, that's a harder exercise.
And that might be for the next MTP, since we're so behind on getting it. I'm sorry, I'm very concerned with making sure this gets approved on time, because that has massive ramifications for DOT and AMATS.
So where that leaves us then is what you're recommending is let's just get the big number balanced out. So we have some time here to look at. There were a couple recommendations. But if we square up your 200 million somehow, we're a long ways towards that, right?
Well, if I may, really where we're at, if that's the path the group takes, is it sounds like we've got the short term zeroed out. Not everyone's happy with it, we got it zeroed out. The long term, we're still 34.1 heavy. That's the
That
conversation.
199 is down to 34.1.
Don't look at the individual, I'm just looking at the bottom line. Out of the 63.4 over where we started, we're still 34.1 over on the long-term programming.
So we need to pull 34 million out of long-term into cluster living.
I think that's an oversimplified
Can you
way
guys
of
hear us
saying it,
okay?
but that's,
Can you hear us okay?
I think that's where we're at, yeah.
Oversimplifying. That's exactly what I said.
Well, I figure Aaron would have a longer response to that question.
Well, Aaron, you had made a recommendation on splitting up this Denali 117.
That's a short term.
Well, we haven't done that. If we shifted short term, well, we can't do that. That's got to be a full project. I would say shift it more to the right, but
Simplify it, we just need to move some projects out of long-term and do cluster two.
did we do this 117? Change that you recommended?
No.
And we don't want to do that now because
That's a short term.
Yeah, I would kind of mess it up.
I think the MOA still over, so that would probably just be doing as well. Aaron, the MOA is still over?
We are.
Yes, in the short term, yes. But the overall program is balanced.
Okay.
That's the point.
Okay, so we come back next year to square things up, that's our project.
So moving on to the long term, I mean, I think this is really for you to lead.
Yeah, I was just looking through, I mean, at this point, I mean, none of these long-term projects are even started, so I'm just looking for one that's around 35 million. You want to see here, there's 209 on page 7.
Mr. Chair, I guess Aaron really does have a good point. We should probably use this as a learning exercise for how we're going to do the next MTP. And if everybody could stomach what we've done, if it's all right with DOT.
Well, just, the only question I have is since I've not been part of this process before, is in the past, is this how you balanced the book? Did it matter?
No,
Never looked at this.
never looked at it, never looked at who was paying for what.
Really?
It was
It was-
just the bottom line.
No.
Yeah, it was always the bottom line, like, okay, we're over, let's find a project.
Is there concern about it now? I don't get it.
Exactly.
And because Mr. Schutte was asking about that,
I was just curious. I was just curious. I didn't say you had to balance it.
You could move project 209 out,
Doesn't
and
matter.
you would just not solve it.
Let's just keep pressing on.
We'd be totally balanced at that point.
Just move 209 into the
So
electric.
discussion for the committee on project 209.
Is it your interest in moving Project 209's timeframe from long-term to illustrative?
Yes.
Okay. Sounds like a good idea.
All right, any other comments from the committee?
Sounds good to me.
All right. So are there any comments from the public to, the recommendation is moving MTP project number 209 Glen Highway Intermediate Interchange Ramp Terminal Upgrades from long-term to illustrative? Seeing none, what is the will of the committee?
Sorry, Seth, do you want to make a motion or you can?
What?
Move to modify MTP Project 209, change the timeframe from long-term to illustrative.
Second.
Are there any objections? Seeing none, the motion is approved.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to keep bobbing up. We do need also to request approval of the transit table and the railroad table and the non-motorized table of projects.
Understood. Let's get through roadways first.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't-
Sharon, what's that do to our math?
We are balanced, we're about 2.9 million under in the long term. Well, a little less, maybe like a million and a half, so it's pretty well balanced.
It's within the target percentage.
It's under, so it's perfect. I don't,
Do we have a, you said the railroad is what else?
No non-motorized transit in the railroad.
It's in our original agenda packet.
the railroad is a new sheet for
That's what
today,
you have on your paper.
and then the transit and the non-motorized are on your tablets.
We have the railroad right here, let's do that one first.
All right, any comments from the committee on public review draft 2040 MTP preferred alternatives for railroad capital projects?
Well, I guess I call on Brian, is this is your expectation and it all works? And
Yes,
are you fiscally constrained?
exceedingly.
All right,
You can add a zero and I will make it go away if you would like.
But that's normal. It's been that wide for a while.
Yeah, I mean, the tip that you see is fairly consistent to what we've had for the last, I don't know how long.
all right, any comments from the public on the public review draft 2040 MTP preferred alternative railroad capital project list? Seeing none, what is the will of the committee?
Move to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
Are there any objections to approving the motion? Seeing none, the motion is approved. Transit.
Should we do non-motorized next?
I would do transit next.
Oh,
But I don't
thanks,
care.
Greg.
Sorry.
Has the roadway list been approved finally?
Roadway list? We're done, yes.
I didn't hear the amendment that was going into 131, the bundle of studies. There was,
Oh, crap, you're right, thank you.
thank you. My name is Richardson.
Darn it, totally spaced that one, thank you.
Can we go back then? Because we didn't approve the package.
So we
Over there.
were doing individuals, so I will just say, what is the, sorry. Are there any comments are there any comments from the committee on MTP number 131, short-term MTP implementation?
Just that we had some discussion about this during the work session earlier. There were some great suggestions made by both staff and policy committee members and public about some clarifying language we could add to the project description. And I think we should do that.
Okay.
And so we're talking about adding a study from L Street and High Street between 15th and 6th, is that correct?
Yeah, we're talking about saying pedestrian safety studies and then listing inside brackets or ellipses what the streets were we were talking about. So I wrote down L Street, I Street, C Street, A Street, and Ingra Gamble as the areas.
And study of emergency secondary access for hillside roads.
Correct.
Public comments.
Good ideas.
Are there any comments from the public on suggestions for MTP number 131?
Thank you for taking care of that.
Thank you for reminding
Yeah,
us.
thank you.
What is the will of the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I move to modify MTP project number 131, the project description, the project that says Ingra/Gamble pedestrian safety study. I move to modify that to say pedestrian safety studies, and then in ellipses, put Ingra/Gamble, comma, I Street/L Street, comma, A Street/C Street, and then close parentheses. Is that clear? Thank you. Is there a second?
What about 15th, between 15th and 6th? Wasn't that in there somewhere?
Well, I don't know that each of these would fall within those north-south boundaries. I think what we're talking about and what we heard from public transit and others is these are the north-south corridors that need that looked at.
Right.
The individual boundaries of each probably should be project dependent, and I don't know that we want to specify them in here.
Okay. All right.
Unless
You
you
got the hillside, did you mention the hillside?
Not yet, I'm doing them in two. I'll let you do that one. I do need a second, though.
Second.
All those opposed? Seeing none, the motion is approved.
Okay, and I will move to amend 131 to include studies of emergency secondary access for hillside roads.
Will you consider an amendment?
Sure.
Can we not limit it just to hillside? Can we include Girdwood and Eagle Rivers
For
for the secondary access concerns?
So we'll just leave it, study emergency secondary access roads. Is that what you're saying?
Good idea. Sure.
Or you say hillside and?
No, I think that's good.
Yeah, that, we just need something big umbrella
Yeah.
in case something comes up, okay. So there would be, add a study of emergency secondary access roads. Okay.
Second.
I think Pete did.
Yeah, I thought I did.
Very good, did. All those opposed? Seeing none, the motion is approved.
Thank you.
That finishes the roads for the second.
I move to extend another 10 minutes, 15, do it by 15, till 6.
Second.
Yeah, second.
All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Meeting is extended another 15 minutes till 6 p.m. Now, moving on to recommended transit.
Find it? That can get you copies.
There it is, thank you.
All right, any comments from the committee on the projects listed in the Public Review 2040 MTP Preferred Alternative Transit Capital Project List?
This is this one page here?
Yes.
That's right, we saw this, but it didn't have the money on
All right. Comments from the public on the 2040 MTP Preferred Alternative Transit Capital Project List? Yes.
Cheryl Richardson. I appreciate this list. I wish it did have some dollar figures on it today. But in general, I think it's an opportunity for the discussion of the flexing of federal dollars to see what we can do, what are the total needs of our transit capital in this town, and where can the money come from for transit capital, which may include monies programmed currently for other buckets of money, other funding categories.
Yes.
I'm sorry, you said something about the amounts being on there. Does your handout not have the estimated annual cost column on it?
That's correct.
Oh,
It must be an old copy.
okay.
It's from
Is there,
TC.
did we bring the new ones, the updated ones?
Yes,
There should be an updated one that has the amounts in there.
Mine don't either.
Oh, mine does. How did I get that?
Mine here? Mine has not.
Yeah, mine has cost estimates.
Try clicking something else. You gotta always look at it.
Okay, anyway.
All right, any other comments from the committee, from the community? Seeing none, what is the will of the committee?
Move to approve the 2040 Transit Capital Project List.
Second.
Thank you. Any objections?
You know, I would say Cheryl probably has a good point, but at this stage, we kind of have what transit
No
asked us
problem.
for.
I
But
mean, I just wanted to flag it.
Then
It
appreciate that.
helps to have money, dollar figures.
Seeing none, the motion is approved. What else we have?
Unmotorized.
Oh, non-motorized.
You're strong.
Great. Well, this is a list we've seen before. Looks like a good list. I think that this is something that should be supported by the group. But look forward to hearing public comment.
Any other committee comments on the non-motorized list? Any comments from the public?
My name is Diana Rhodes. I'm with the Anchorage Park Foundation, and we just wanted to thank you for the non-motorized project number 409. It's the Campbell Trail crossing at Lake Otis, and we just recently have put together this plan for an amazing bike loop. It's actually in the shape of a moose. It's fantastic that our existing trail infrastructure, when you put it together, it actually is in the shape of a moose. And the most dangerous section of that, actually the whole thing can be completed very safely, except for this one crossing at Lake Otis. And so having this in the short-term project list is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public?
Can I ask a question of staff real quick?
Yes.
To follow up on that comment, thank you for the comment. And maybe the TAC had no comments, but did we get a summary of recommended changes to the non-motorized? Because nobody made any suggestions. Because it was perfect the first time out. Wow.
Love them.
They're all out there riding around at treat stations. They don't have time to read.
All right, what is the will of the committee?
Move to approve the 2040 MTP preferred alternative for non-motorized projects. Second.
Any objections? Seeing none, the motion is approved. Transit capital.
Did it? All we're looking at is the old agenda, so what do we do next?
That's it.
Do we need to do
Adjourn.
public comments?
Yeah, committee comments and public.
Committee comments and public comments.
Moved off.
Do you want to know for the record that
Committee.
we postponed this, the project plan update? I mean, it's on here, sure. We recognize we didn't do it.
We'll get that next meeting.
All right, item 8, committee comments.
We just have to get better at writing fiction.
Well, you know, I would make a comment, and I think it's highlighted, but, so after all this stuff we've done, and you're gonna write up a public review draft, but I would wanna make sure it's clear in there. I wanna say, the fiction that we've created, but a reality, and say that, you know, this is anticipated given these, I mean, you'll give your assumptions and revenues, but somewhere very clearly point out that some of these things may not really happen in the short term or the long term. It's based on pretty broad assumptions. Just in fairness to the public process, I mean, people look at these and go, oh, this is great, I wanted that road to be done forever, and 20 years from now, perhaps it won't be because there wasn't really the money. In some way, make it clear to people that that's our reality.
Sometimes.
Do we get to see it before you, like you write the draft, we see it, then it goes public, or?
You will have a policy committee review draft before we, and we'll bring that to you and ask you to release it to the public with any requested changes.
Thank you.
No comment.
All right, moving on to public comments. Are there any comments from the public?
Cheryl Richardson. I'll be brief. It's been pretty exciting to see the municipality stand tall for the community priorities during this process, and I just want to thank you folks.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Any
Good job,
objections to adjourn?
Todd.
With 6 minutes to spare, what am I gonna do with my time?
No, the motion is approved. The meeting is adjourned at 5:55.
Before it's over from our original.